Hello, Canute. Canute, you want to say hello to everybody? You're going to be a good mascot today? Okay, because we're gonna study the Bible today. Yeah, you can just enjoy. Okay. You gonna scratch? Okay. Anyway, this is Canute. He's in the Bears gym, just chilling in the grilling and having a little fun with Daddy. And but we're gonna get to a little Bible study today, so. Just a little introduction to Canute there. Yeah, and he's going to sing a little bit, because I can't stop that. You're going to give us a little silence, right? Okay, maybe he will. Okay, we are in Exodus chapter 21. God has a very firm standard. For us, it would be outlook on what is right, what is wrong, some standards of living in that day and age where, you didn't really have governments, setting up an authoritarian rule so much. It was more very tribal, like the Bedouins, and he who had the most slaves and sons kind of ruled their little area. They had some nations, warring and attacking and so forth. And as we get to the Diluvian time, the time of the flood, then we move on. And Noah and his sons repopulated the earth. And once again, man kind of wanted to set up a government, and we had the Tower of Babel. And man would think, well, we all want to work together in harmony. And really, that's not God's plan. God really likes it that there's people in the various continents of various creeds, colors, races, establishing their own program. Obviously, those that work in Norway don't work in Angola. Those that work in Peru don't work in Canada. There's various, cultures, and God likes it that way. God wanted man to be diverse, but to have one God. And the thing with the Tower of Babel was they were going to have their own God, the sun, the moon, the stars, with human sacrifices and so forth. And then God divided the peoples by dividing their languages, and only God can do that. And then obviously over the generations, man has changed because people are different, right? People are different. And they all came from Noah and his 3 sons and from the 8 people on the ark. And once again, they grew into nations. And then we have Egypt. And we have Israel. We have the Babylonians again resurfaced, the Chaldeans, and various groups of peoples throughout the earth. As the children of Israel were in bondage in Egypt, they learned a lot of bad things. The various multitudinal gods that the Egyptians worship. They were very powerful militarily, but spiritually they were babes. They were like in East India where they had elephants with multiple horns and many armed female deities and just countless gods. River gods that worship the frogs, the flies, the crocs, the river. They were over the top in their demon worship. God, the one true God, then took Israel, brought him into Egypt. The 12 tribes kind of came to fruition there. And they learned a lot of skills. Very possibly they're involved in the building of the pyramids. We don't really know who really built them. The Jewish people are very intelligent, very smart. The embalming processes that they learned in Egypt, the building, the construction, the woodworking, the metal forging. They learned a lot of good things in Egypt. They learned bad things too. So we're going to get to Exodus 21. And the law has been given out to Moses and the children of Israel. He's given the 10 Commandments and more. and have given them some standards of what is right and wrong in that day and age. Slavery wasn't viewed as a bad thing. It was a necessary part of society, because we didn't have welfare in those days for people to just grow and mutate crime and proliferate, the negative always taking in and not giving back out. So they had slavery. And if you weren't willing to work, you were put to forced labor. If you couldn't provide for your own, you had to give yourself to be a slave. They had certain things of how do you deal with children that attack their parents, curse their parents, those that are fighting and somebody accidentally gets killed. So they had a lot of venues that surfaced. And God is giving the children of Israel the standards for what is right and wrong and how to deal with it. So, if we can get on in this beautiful Bible study with our mascot slightly out of control, we are going to enjoy Exodus 21 to the fullest from the Bears Gym here. So Canute, you behave yourself, okay? Can you do that? Can you hear that? Can you hear that, son? I think he can hear that. So hopefully he's going to be a good boy. Exodus 21. Now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. If thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. So that was for a Hebrew slave. There was a different standard than the alien and the Hebrew person. There just was. Because Hebrews were God's people, and if they got down and out, it was okay to be sold into slavery, but on the 7th year they were to go free and to try and establish a normal life for themselves and their family. Verse 3. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master have given him a wife, and she have borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. That's kind of an interesting concept, because the understanding of really the man that was a slave was given a wife, and they had kiddies together, but they were property of the master that gave him the wife. So it was kind of a good thing for a slave owner to have a good slave, good scrapping slave, and he gave him a good scrapping wife, and they would have kiddies together, and they would work together, and the sons would grow up, and they'd be servants too. It was a good deal. But if the slave ever somehow earned his freedom by monies or so forth, then he was to go out by himself, because the wife and the kiddies were actually the master's property. So it was a wise move on the master's part. So there was rules and regulations to even the slavery concept of that day. However, if the servant shall plainly say, verse 5, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free. In other words, he's deciding to stay there and work and live with his master, as many of the slaves did during the plantation days in early America. Some of them, while they earned their freedom, they continued to stay on in their plantations. After the Civil War, some of the plantations were kind of ruined, but many of them also then had the right then to stay and work on the plantations. And the Civil War was, good, bad. It was bad. They wanted to recede from the Union, but they kind of destroyed the plantation industry. The whole, they provided produce through the states and throughout the world. And that kind of was kind of a crime to the South, what the North did. And don't get me wrong, have lived in the North most of my life. some parts in the South, and they kind of got the short end of the stick. But that was the process. If they wanted to live and work and stay there, they could, and have families and work the plantations or farms or whatever you call it. And it was good business. Okay. I work my job. I willfully go there every day. They pay me a check, and I can provide for my kitties and my doggies and my bunnies, and like that. Bunny, I only have one bunny, one wife, one man, one woman, and that's a marriage. Not two Cinderfellas married or two Cinderellas married. One guy, one bear, and one she-bear. That's a marriage. Okay, none of this weird stuff that the Big O has put out of the White House, the abomination. And the Sodom and Gomorrah stuff. That's an abomination to God. That's why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Lord willing, we will be done with this as we're speaking in 2016 and move on to hopefully a godly regime that will bring God's input back into America, into the courtroom, into the Senate, into the House of Representatives, into all of America, the schools, that the Word of God will be the central figure encapsulated in Jesus Christ throughout our schools, our churches, our government, all aspects. Because that's how you can truly be free. Because unless you're free in Christ, you're not really free. So they had establishments of the man, the wife, the slave. He has a wife. He has kitties. So the slave says to his master, I don't want to go out. I love my wife, my kitties, and I just want to be your permanent slave. So his master would take him to the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. So you see that now, the guys with a ring in their ear, sometimes that meant they were the homo dudes. And sometimes it's just kind of cool, I don't have that, but if you do, you do. But in the old days, if you had a big earring here, it meant you were the bond slave of somebody, and it meant something, that you couldn't be bought. And you could be free if you wanted to, but you have chosen to be the servant or slave of somebody that you respect. Okay, verse 7. And if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. So there was a different standard for the women if they were taken in as slaves. If they were to be another man's, sold to be the wife of the slave owner or his son, then they were to be permanently the servant. They didn't go free as the men servants did. Just the way it is. Verse 8. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let she or her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation he shall not. He shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. So, if he has betrothed her to his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. In other words, to the dowry to be paid. And if he take himself another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall not be diminished. In other words, there was a lot said there. He couldn't just, he could take her for a while to be his wife and then sell her as a slave to somebody else, to a foreign nation, when he has already brought her into his household. He just couldn't do that. He had to bring her then as a daughter, and if she was to go free, he was to pay a dowry for her. And then where she went was up to her. And if she was betrothed to his son, then she was to be treated as a daughter. Or as his wife, she is to be treated as a wife fully and paid fully for for all of her as a normal wife would be treated. And if he do not these three things unto her, then she shall go out free without money. In other words, if he refuses to do all these things to her, then she has then now the privilege of being a free moral agent and going out free. So in a sense, actually, it turns out for the woman better if the slave owner refuses to keep to these three stipulations. Verse 12, he that smiteth a man so that he die shall surely be put to death. Somebody that lays in wait for somebody to kill them, like a riot that, we see riots in the inner cities where their mobs are going down the street, bashing people over the head and people die. Those people were to receive the death penalty. Verse 13, and if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place where he shall flee. In other words, two men, two bears, they had a disagreement about who got the last box of donuts that were on sale, and they start pushing and shoving, and you don't want to release a bear. Once you release a bear, they don't settle down, right? I think I've told you the story. If you see a bear in a blackberry bush as you're hiking through the woods, you don't want to start throwing rocks at them and get them riled up. You want to kind of, kind of tiptoe around the two loops and let him enjoy the blackberry bush. Don't get him riled up. Because if you get a bear riled up, he's going to show his teeth, and once the teeth come out, it's not nice. So if two bears, get into it here, and one of them winds up in the wrestling match getting killed, it wasn't a premeditated murder, but they got a little overzealous, and one of them got killed. And they were to go to a refuge city, whom God appointed, until the courts could decide that particular case. Verse 14, but if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, thou shalt take him from mine altar that he may die. In other words, the church couldn't protect him. If he premeditatedly killed another human being, whether it be by rioting or anarchy or a coup because they are intending murder to take over, then they were to receive capital punishment, the death penalty. And that is different if two men are wrestling and one gets the short end of the stick and dies. He is to be allowed to escape to a refuge city. But premeditated murder, rioting, so forth, where people are killed, everybody involved was to get the death penalty. That was kind of a standard. In the Roman Empire, when riots broke out, they released the troops and the crowd, and they mowed everybody down. And like I said before, they had a little problem with rioting back in those days. They knew how to deal with it. We kind of play around with it, and a lot of innocent people get hurt and killed. A lot of property gets burned to the ground as they sit back and watch and let them have their rioting fun. It's ridiculous. It's the government's job to maintain control and order in their cities. Nonetheless, we live in a different day and age, don't we? Verse 15, he that hits his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. Hitting your mother and father with the purpose of causing hurt, damage, that child is to receive the death penalty. That definitely would cure a lot of the little kids punching their parents around, hitting their parents around, attempting to put their parents to death because they told them no. So you hit your parents, you get the death penalty. That caused a lot of families to be in order in those days. He that steals a man and sells him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. Kidnapping Kidnapping also was a death penalty crime. They didn't mess around. Kidnappers were put to death. Here's another one, kind of interesting. Verse 17, he that curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. If you curse your mother and your father, that would get you the death penalty. As I said, they didn't have what we have now, where little kids punching their parents, hitting their parents, cursing their parents. We have kind of a problem with that, kind of across the board, with disrespectful attitudes, behavior, conduct. They didn't have that much of a problem back then. To curse your mother and your father would bring you the death penalty. Verse 18. And if men strive together, and one smite another with a stone or with his fist, and he die not, but keepeth his bed, if he rise again and walk abroad upon his staff, then shall he that smote him be quit, or in other words, be off the hook. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall cause him to be thoroughly healed. So two man bears were going at it, and the other guy kind of gets, he taps out, but he's really maimed. Though the guy that was the winner, like I say, sometimes when you're the winner, you're the loser. This is the case. If you win the fight and the guy's on the ground kind of maimed for a few months by his injuries, broken arm, broken leg, whatever, well, guess whose responsibility it was to pay for all of his lost time work? You were. So, like I say, sometimes you win, you lose, and you lose, you win. And so it'd be the victorious bear's job to take care of the man and his family that he hurt for the duration until he was back on his feet. That'd be a good law to have in place today also. And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall surely be punished. So you couldn't just kill your servants. You would likewise receive the same punishment as any other capital punishment crime. You couldn't just kill your servants. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money or is his property. In other words, if he lives a day or two, it wasn't really your intent to kill him, but yeah, you got a little bit carried away, but he was your property. So whatever the punishment was with a man accidentally killed one of his slaves, that would be been up to the judges. It wasn't really a premeditated murder. It was just something that the judges then would have to take up in the courts. But if the slave lived for a few days, then he was not to be punished at all. Verse 22. If men strive and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit, or a little child, depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. Once again, that would wind up in the courts or the gates of that city for the elders and the judges to decide that case. Verse 23. And if any mischief follow, then shalt thou give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And once again, that was a judgment restriction for the courts of that day, so they couldn't just hang people because they stole Johnny's shoe, or Susie's handkerchief. There was a restriction. If they stole their handkerchief, then they'd have to replace the handkerchief. If they accidentally broke Susie's foot, then they'd get their foot broken. Or they'd have to pay monetary value of whatever the parents or the owner or the people or the judges would decide. Verse 26. And if a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid, that the eye perishes, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. So freedom for a slave, if he would lose his eye when the master beat him for disobeying, then the slave would gain his freedom. Even to this day, there's some corporations where injuries have happened and there are laws in place with insurance companies and so forth. If a worker loses an eye, then there's a monetary compensation, and that, there's a payout, a buyout. If a man smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his toothache. So, if you got your teeth knocked out on the job site, then that was to be, once again, a buyout for you, and you could go free. Verse 28. If an ox gore a man or a woman that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. I think we pretty much got that law here in our country, that if an animal kills a human being, the animal's pretty much put down immediately. But if the ox were wont to push with his horn in time past, and it has been testified to his owner, and he hath not kept him in, but he killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and the owner also shall be put to death. Kind of interesting. You got an ox, and people have been telling you that bull or that ox is hurting people. It's maiming people. And if the owner don't put him down and don't listen, and then it goes out and kills somebody, guess what? The ox was killed, and the owner was killed also, death penalty. So you have big animals, it's your responsibility. Verse 30, if there be laid on him a sum of money, then he shall give for the ransom of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. So if the family of whoever this animal killed should say, no, we don't want death penalty, we want, half of your property or all of your property, then they could ask it if he valued his life as such. And then he would be free. But he was definitely held accountable. Verse 31, whether he have gored a son or have gored a daughter, according to this judgment shall it be done unto him. If the ox shall push a manservant or maidservant, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So there was an automatic sum of money that was automatic for slaves if they were killed by the ox. And if a man shall open a pit or a hole, and a man falls into the pit, and he didn't cover it, and an ox or a donkey fall therein, the owner of the pit shall make it good and give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. So if you dig a big hole or big ditch, it is your responsibility to barricade it off so that people couldn't fall in. If one man's ox hurt another's, that he die, then they shall sell the live ox, divide the money of it, and the dead ox also they shall divide. Or if it be known that the ox hath used to push in time past, and his owner hath not kept him in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead shall be his own. So if you have bulls on your property, or oxen, or steers with the big horns, or even, have your own little private zoo, and you got big cats or bears, and you don't keep them in the enclosures and they get out and kill people, it is your responsibility. And so it's something to think about when you try to, bring in nice bears into your little home zoo. Because, bears, we can be nice, but, you don't want to rile the bears up. So if you have bears, treat them good in your nice home zoo, in your enclosures. And bears, toss them a few donuts, occasionally. So anyway, that's a little bear humor there, which I think is okay, right? You like bear humor. I like bear humor. Bear humor really gets the point across. And I think you'll agree. Animals in relation to mankind are a little different. But sometimes we share common things, like Canute over here. Canute likes to have little pieces of steak off of Daddy's plate. but he doesn't get the whole steak because he's our little mascot, right? He's our little baby bear, but he's getting there. Anyway, Exodus 21 is a wrap today, and I hope you've learned some interesting things, maybe things to think about. Perhaps you think it's a little cruel, but life isn't always easy, and there's a lot of complex issues that have to be dealt with, period. And you can't, the days are going to come eventually where crime has to be dealt with, and murders have to be done away with. Not putting them in jail for 30 years to let them get big and fat and watch television when they've committed abhorrent crimes to society. They need to be punished. Murderers, kidnappers, rapists. Capital punishment. It has to happen. That's God's way. Okay. Next time we'll pick up in our next delicious scripture section. And sometimes Old Testament, has some things that we don't really live with here in New Testament times. But it's really okay. It's good for us to understand some very strict and pure and godly judgments on crime in this world, because we live in a fallen world. And it's not like the Garden of Eden, and there are things out there that will kill you, and to monitor what we're doing also, and redirect the attention not upon us, but unto God, in whom we serve. All right, from the Bears, Jim, and so from Canute and I, we wish you Godspeed. See you next time.